as we move forward with developing our new partnership with Alberta's two largest cities. Our government, under the leadership of Premier Prentice, is focused on renewing our partnership with all municipalities. But today, we are entering into a new phase with Calgary and Edmonton with the official signing of a framework agreement. This framework agreement will form the basis of discussions as we move toward the development of charters for the two cities. First, we're going to have Premier Prentice is going to come and speak, and then we'll have Mayor Nenshi and then Mayor Iveson. So please, Premier Prentice.
Well, thank you, Mr. McQueen, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I should say I'd like to special thanks to Minister McQueen for all of her help in getting us to this point. She's almost finished her mandate letter at this juncture. But I'm delighted to be here with Mayor Nenshi and Mayor Iveson and our new Municipal Affairs Minister to discuss the next steps in the province's evolving partnership with Alberta's two biggest urban municipalities. And so it's been less than a month since our new cabinet took office, 23 days actually, for those of you who are counting. And all along we've said that the government is under new management and that we're not afraid to make decisions and move forward. And we've been living up to this standard very consistently, taking early steps to address key issues, which I heard about over the course of the summer from Albertans across the province. And today is no different in that respect. Some of the most critical issues that we must confront are those that challenge Calgary and Edmonton, the challenges in the ability of our two large cities to deliver outstanding public services, to construct new infrastructure, and to protect and enhance the quality of life of everyone who calls these cities homes. And so we're all, I think, as Albertans, immensely proud of our urban communities and our urban environment. And our urban centers are increasingly important contributors to both the economic growth of our province and also to the reputation that we have in the wider world. But of course, our cities are under tremendous pressure. Alberta's population continues to expand, as we all know. Each year, 100,000 people move into this province, and that trend is not about to stop anytime soon. In fact, last year, at some point, we passed the 4 million population threshold in this province. Projections are that within a decade, the population of our province will exceed 5 million people. And obviously, many of these newcomers choose to make Edmonton or Calgary their home. And all of these new arrivals are welcome. They bring fresh energy, they bring enthusiasm, they bring opportunities, and in every respect, they drive Alberta's economy. But there are, of course, things that they cannot bring with them when they arrive in our urban cities. When people move here, they don't bring schools for their children. They don't bring new healthcare facilities with them. They don't bring roads. They don't bring seniors' lodges or upgraded transportation facilities. And so the result of all that, which I heard loud and clear about this summer, is that Calgary and Edmonton face serious infrastructure deficits. And so these are the areas where governments must get caught up. And so keeping our urban centers vibrant and their governments flexible and responsive is work that we all need to do together, to accomplish together, and that applies to everyone who's in this room. And so that work really began anew on the foundations of an improved partnership between a province, which is under new management, and Alberta's two leading cities. And that's why I'm happy to be here today, accompanied by Minister McQueen, to sign an agreement affirming the province's commitment to civic charters for Calgary and Edmonton. Under the terms of the framework agreement for charters for the cities of Calgary and Edmonton, we will restart talks around the development of civic charters, which are ultimately meant to give each city new tools and capabilities to manage their growth. And the provincial government, of course, is pursuing this because we recognize that both Edmonton and Calgary face unique challenges. The need and the freedom to come up with innovative solutions, homegrown solutions for delivering services and building infrastructures. Now, I heard about the need for civic charters on my first day on the job, and I think many of you were present. My very first meetings as Premier Designate less than a month ago were actually with Mayor Iveson and Mayor Nenshi, and it was with a purpose that I could learn about moving forward in the partnership. And the agreement that we are going to sign today was discussed at that time with both of the mayors. And so we are acting, I am acting on what I have heard and what I've learned. These civic charters will be developed through a partnership between Edmonton, Calgary, and the provincial government. We will sit down, as the document says, in an atmosphere of mutual respect for an open dialogue about roles and about responsibilities. I'm not going to speculate today on exactly what the final outcome looks like in terms of the civic charters, but I have the utmost confidence that these agreements will ensure that Calgarians and Edmontonians are better off with enhanced programs and services, with timely plans for new infrastructure, and all leading ultimately to a quality of life in our urban environment, which is the envy of everyone in the world. I can also tell you that the charters will be finalized on a fiscally sustainable basis. They will in no way endorse or permit the creation of new taxation powers. And to be clear, the government is not contemplating additional taxes. There is only one taxpayer, the Alberta public, and we're not about to add to the public's burden at this point. To do so, I think, would just weaken and sap the dynamism that makes this such a great part of our province and our country. And so the message that I've heard is clear. Governments at every level must do a responsible job with the dollars that they currently have at their disposal. So we all understand that, and the civic charters will certainly reflect our collective understanding as we move forward. But they will also reflect a sense of optimism amongst our three governments about Alberta's potential. We know that we are facing unprecedented challenges in terms of population growth, fierce pressures on infrastructure, and the undeniable need to come up with realistic, well-thought-out solutions. But as we know, Albertans are innovators, always, and risk-takers, and we're open to new ideas and trying new things and the alignment of responsibilities. And so the civic charters will embrace this ambitious spirit. And so I, again, spoke about this 23 or 4 days ago when I met Mayor Nenshi and Mayor Iveson. And so I'm very excited about the chance to work with both of them on a project which is so vital to the future of this province. I know that Edmontonians, Calgarians, and Albertans are counting on us, and we all have the intention to live up to those expectations. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. And before I introduce Mayor Nenshi, I also want to welcome Heather Klimchuk is here with us, the Minister of Human Services, joining us. There's Heather. Thank you, Heather, for being here. And of course, the great council of the City of Calgary is here as well, so thank you all for being here as well. And so now, Mayor Nenshi, if we can have you come, and thank you very much for having us here in your city today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Minister McQueen, and it is my great honor to have everyone here in historic City Hall today and with my colleagues on Calgary City Council. It's really fitting that we're here. This building was built 103 years ago, and I know that the people who were laying the stones, the sandstone for this building 103 years ago, could not have imagined the city that this building would now serve. 1.2 million people, more people than 5 provinces. Tremendously complex issues, tremendously strong growth. In the last 3 years alone, the City of Calgary has added more people than live in the 3rd largest city in Alberta. We have added Red Deer times 1.25. And as the Premier stated, if you think about the amount of infrastructure in a place like Red Deer, not just schools and hospitals, but roads, transitways, fire halls, police stations, the amount of infrastructure it takes to manage those sort of people. Now imagine taking that entire population and putting it into this city without that infrastructure. And that's the situation that we deal with. We're very lucky, though, Premier. I would much rather be managing the complexities of growth than the opposite. But we also know that the vast majority of those people coming to Alberta are moving to Calgary and Edmonton. And that as cities, we have to think about how we manage ourselves and how we develop in new and different ways. So today is a very important day. Today we're taking a major step towards developing that new relationship between the province and between the cities. And many of you will be asking yourselves, well, what does it mean? What are we actually signing today? What difference will it make for citizens in our community? And the answer to that question is, well, it's another step on the road. What's important about today's framework is that it explicitly outlines the relationship between the provincial government and the two cities. A treatment of governments as equals, as partners in the growth of our communities. And it outlines a number of areas in which we have to work together better. Some of those are certainly fiscal. And as you've heard from the Premier, we are developing a new fiscal framework, a new way that the cities can fund both our capital and operating budgets going forward, and reducing our reliance overall on the property tax, which no one is surprised to hear me say is a regressive and horrible form of taxation. That's important. But just as important are the issues around decision-making and authority and serving citizens better. We've created a system where too often citizens are told, well, I need this service. And the city says, well, it's the province's responsibility to fund it. I'd love to help you, but it's the province's responsibility. And the province will say, well, we'd love to fund it, but ultimately it's the mayor's job or council's job to actually make the determinations on what our priorities are. And we can pass that buck all day. And at the end of the day, the service is not provided in the way it should be provided. And today is an important first step on that journey. So I'm thrilled to be here. I want to say a special thank you to the hardworking staff of the City of Calgary, and particularly my colleagues who organized today's event on very short notice. They did a marvelous job. My office is stocked with snacks, which I'm very excited about. I'm not giving them back. And I just want to say thank you to all my colleagues at the City of Calgary for doing that. And to my colleagues on City Council. We're in the middle of a never-ending council meeting, but they're all here because we know just how important this is. So Minister McQueen, 22 days in? 22 days in, you're working your way through that mandate letter. Thank you. We look forward to working with you, and we look forward to working with you, Premier, on all of the next steps. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nenshi. It's a real pleasure now to have from the City of Edmonton, Mayor Don Iveson come and join us. Don, thank you for being here. You hosted us in Edmonton at AUMA just a week ago, and now it's great to be here and have you here in Calgary, so welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, and as a former mayor yourself, Minister McQueen, did a phenomenal job at Alberta Urban Municipalities Association's meeting with almost everybody from every different shape and size of community in the province here. So she's absolutely off to a very strong start as our minister, and thankful to her for the work that she's done to help us get to today. And I also am grateful to the Premier for responding to the urging from each of our cities to work with us as partners, which this is really the start of that journey in earnest, to work together as partners to redefine the relationship between our two large cities and the province of Alberta as a true partnership. And I'll talk a little bit about how I think that can work. But I also want to thank Mayor Nenshi for hosting us today and for the snacks. And also, in addition to his staff who've burned the midnight oil to get this document ready for us to sign today, and my staff, also the folks at Municipal Affairs and the Premier's office. This was an all hands on deck to make this happen, and I want to make sure to acknowledge the public servants who helped make that possible. But certainly the leadership is what's driven this, and we appreciate that leadership being here today. I also want to thank my council colleagues for their patience in this. They're not here with me today, but representing them. We are all eager to be able to move ahead with this conversation because it can redefine the potential for each one of these two cities, which in turn redefines the potential of Alberta. You know, if we are to be a globally competitive province, it must be led by two great globally competitive cities. And I think the charter discussions are the pathway to getting us there. We have elements of it now, and we have phenomenal potential, and this is a way to ensure that we reach it. Now, this is a first step. This is a journey, but I'm pleased to be able to tell you that the framework includes firm timelines for moving through that journey. It has moved slowly up to this point, but with renewed leadership all around, we're now able to move forward on it, which is encouraging. And it talks about, in addition to the fiscal framework, it talks about areas of clarity and roles and responsibility, which I think we have to come to. But after we have clarity on roles and responsibility, the next item of business is to explore where we can partner effectively to achieve each other's goals. And then finally, to talk about how we're going to fund that. But I think it's important to think about this in terms of a stronger partnership, because we do a lot of things where the province is not succeeding, say with its social policy framework. around homelessness, around poverty, around addictions and mental health. And that becomes my policing budget. And it's the same in Calgary. And much as I would just like money for policing, and frankly needed in the short term, what I'd like is for the City of Edmonton, the City of Calgary, to be able to partner with the province, to partner with Minister Klimchuk, who's sitting on our poverty reduction task force and engaging in exactly the kind of partnership way that we need for this to be successful. Engage with us because we know our communities best. We know who the effective partners are on the ground so that the province can reach social policy framework goals, can reduce poverty, can eliminate homelessness, can increase population health, all of which are going to have much greater savings for that one taxpayer paying to the province of Alberta than it costs to invest in cities and communities to achieve those results. That's the real strength of the partnership. And roles and responsibilities is not about this is mine, this is yours. It's how can we work together to achieve each other's objectives, which make for a stronger Alberta with a healthier and more productive population that, yes, requires less interaction with the healthcare system, requires less interaction with my police, leads to less social disorder on our streets, improves conditions for business, improves labor market participation, all the things that we desperately need here in order to build those globally competitive cities that we know Edmonton and Calgary are just on the cusp of becoming. And so once we've worked on reaction and once we've worked on prevention, then I think there's room for us to dream about the kind of cities that we can build here that will attract talent and investment from all around the world. And with the kind of growth that Mayor Nenshi described as coming to Calgary, we're seeing the same thing. Edmonton is Canada's fastest growing city. 30,000 people moved to my city last year. That's a 3.5% growth rate, which is almost impossible to endure in an industrialized economy. And so it requires all hands on deck, all orders of government, but especially our provincial partners in order to respond to that growth and stay competitive and stay ahead of it and build those great cities that we know we can. And of course, that's interchanges, that's LRT, that's hospitals, that's schools, but we'll get much more of it done, and we'll get it done much more cost effectively if we work together. And I think the charter really, for me today, the significance of this is the opening of that conversation about how we can deliver results for our citizens rather than pointing at each other and saying, well, that's your role, that's your role, this is my responsibility, I don't have these resources. We can redefine the conversation to how are we working together to mobilize those scarce resources to greatest effect. And I think that's what I look forward to being able to do in the coming months in order to deliver for our citizens exactly the kind of results that they demand from all elected officials. And I think we have the leadership now to be able to do that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Dawn and Mayor Nenshi and Premier Prentice for your words. I think, Premier, I'm excited absolutely to be the Minister of Municipal Affairs. We have two outstanding mayors here, but it's the vision about the partnership that you have brought in together and talked a lot about in the days of the campaign, but certainly as you've been Premier, about how we're working together and how do we create two great cities that are already great but make them even greater. And so looking forward to this. So now we're going to have a signing ceremony with regards to signing the frameworks.
Please use the microphones, then we can hear you over the phones. And we'll ask that you start with charter questions and hold other questions until the end. Sure.
A question for Mayor Nenshi, who's been on this process the longest. We had first heard about this this memorandum of understanding back in early 2013 that it was nearly ready. Has much, first of all, has much changed since you were saying this was nearly ready more than a year ago? And what do you make of that discrepancy between this was almost done more than a year ago and we're hearing about it in October 2014?
Significantly more than a year ago, as a matter of fact. And I will say, actually, no, not much has changed. Council approved a penultimate version of this framework about that long ago. And so not a lot has changed in terms of the content. Of course, a lot has changed in the provincial government. So we can understand why there were delays in being able to move this thing forward. However, I will point out that the Premier and the Minister have been on the job for, let's call it 23 days. And in those 23 days, we've seen extraordinary forward movement. Without dwelling on the past too much, I have met and spoken to this minister more in 22 days than I spoke with her predecessor 3 ministers ago in 2.5 years. So certainly we've seen a lot of commitment from the Governor of Alberta to move this thing forward, and that's something we're deeply appreciative of. And I look forward to getting through to the next steps. So rather than dwell on the process that got us here, I'm really focused on what's happened very recently, how well we've worked together, and on how we're going to move this thing forward from here.
Perhaps as a best question for the Premier. In terms of now that we have entered into an agreement for the charters, could we have a little bit more of a specific timeline on when we could actually see some of the framework, whether it's a matter of months or a year or so? And could we have a little bit more of an explanation about what the fiscal framework will look like?
Well, in answer to your second question, that will evolve over in due course based on discussions amongst the parties. So we'll leave that for future discussion. I'm not going to speculate on what it will look like. There's, quite a bit of work that will be done, and you'll see the final product that reflects a consensus amongst all of us. If you read the agreement, you'll see there's an appendix attached to it. It sets out a work plan in 3 phases, and with timelines attached to each phase, and we are very specific about that. That's how the agreement is structured. It not only sets out the areas which we are going to work together on, but it sets out a scope of work and a timeline. Spring 2015 is the time within which we expect the first phase to complete. The second and third phases carry through until the spring of 2016. But the importance of this agreement, this is not simply an agreement to agree. There is a timeline attached and a specific scope of work, and that's, I think, the ingeniousness of the agreement.
Next question?
I'm sure that this applies equally to the citizens of both major cities, but what does this actually mean to them? I know you touched on that a little bit, Mr. Mayor, but maybe you could just elaborate a little. What does that actually mean to the average person?
Why don't you take it first, and I'll follow up.
Well, I'll give you a sense of why this is relevant to the city of Edmonton, why the 2 large cities have special need for this. And it's that we are not, I don't just serve 877,926 Edmontonians. We serve a metro area of 1.2 to 1.3 million, but more importantly, Edmonton is a service center, as is Calgary for the southern half of the province. Edmonton is a service center for the northern half of the province. And as such, as 70% of my region, I have about 70% of the population. I have 90% of the social housing. I have 100% of the homeless shelters in my community. When there's a traffic accident in my community, I think it's 43% or 48% of the vehicles involved are not from Edmonton. And so we bear the cost of providing complex policing, everything from traffic to drugs, human trafficking, cybercrime, and the City of Edmonton's Edmonton Police Service does a great job with limited, primarily property tax funded resources. And so if we have a new fiscal framework that recognizes that each city is a service center for each half of the province, and some of these issues I think you would find the Mayor of Grand Prairie, the Mayor of Red Deer, the Mayor of Lethbridge would tell you on a smaller scale are the same things. So some of this may inform the Municipal Government Act discussions. Some of the framework may apply to other communities as well. But disproportionately, you will find in Edmonton an overconcentration of high users of service living in housing that pays little to no property taxes. And so we have to provide specialized transit, which is $25 a trip instead of regular transit, which is $3 a trip, to high users of services who, again, often live in housing, which rightly so is exempt from property tax. And so we have zero revenue, and those high needs individuals concentrate disproportionately to the cities near healthcare, near social services. And so we need some recognition of that, some assistance to that, so we can continue to provide them the support services like specialized transit, low-income bus pass, discounted access to community recreation centers, because if they're mobile, they're more likely to be employed and get skills upgrading. If they're healthy, they're going to require less expenditure from the healthcare system. So it's immediately relevant because I have a high needs population that comes from a catchment area of all of northern Alberta and actually into the territories and other provinces as well, but I'm not going to hold Mr. Prentice accountable for that. Well, maybe arm in arm we'll go to the feds and deal with some of those questions, but and the council, the federation. But for now, let's start with redefining the relationship with cities. So that's how it's relevant to Edmontonians, is that on property tax alone, which I think the Mayor of Calgary called regressive and horrible, I would add medieval. It's really a feudal form of taxation. It's not terribly fair. We are now taxing my 877,926 people to deliver services to really people who come from a catchment all across northern Alberta. And I think if we have clarity around that, I'm happy to host those people. I'm glad that they think Edmonton is a safe place for them to be. I want to make sure that they're productive, that they're healthy, because that's going to help the province achieve its public policy objectives as well, and save us all money in the long run, and ensure that those people have better quality of life, and not do so solely at the expense of property taxpayers in Edmonton.
I'll give you a non-money example. Because everything that Mayor Iveson has said about the fiscal framework is exactly right. That's why a new fiscal framework is needed, because of the role we serve as regional service centers. But Minister McQueen, in her old job, and I had lots of discussions around a simple situation, which was a gas leak in the community of Bowness, the former Gas Plus gas station. It has now been nearly 5 years since that gas leak, and it is not yet cleaned up. And the problem that we had, and people are still out of their home, the problem that we had was a jurisdictional one, in that the City of Calgary had perhaps the environmental expertise, the knowledge of the watershed, and the ability to clean that up, but we did not have the jurisdiction to do so. Alberta Environment, whose specialty is not urban environmental issues, had the jurisdiction to do so, but was also stymied by a number of administrative rules. So in short, the gas plume didn't get cleaned up, and we're still working on it. We're still working on it. The new minister is really working on it, Minister Fawcett. But we're still working on it, and people have been out of their homes for nearly 5 years. And this is a great example of jurisdictional problems. The cities have grown up, and we're at the point where we have very sophisticated civic administrations. I've got nearly 20,000 colleagues here at the City of Calgary who do great work every day. But we are stymied by bureaucratic rules and administrative procedures that prevent us from being able to serve citizens as well as we could. So that's one example. My other favorite example, which always shocks provincial politicians, is that this little gathering of my city council in this room with me is illegal, because we are not allowed to be more than 8 of us in a room where work of the city is being done without it being minuted and the city clerk being present and notice being given. These rules may make sense for Rosebud, Alberta. They don't make a lot of sense for the City of Calgary or the City of Edmonton. So fixing these things will provide for better customer service to citizens on the things that they need their civic governments to do.
We're going to go to the phones. Operator, please put through the next call.
I'll maybe just address that question
Sorry,
as well.
just hold.
I would put it this way, I suppose. As Albertans, we are the envy of the world in terms of the strength of our economy, the kind of society that we have, the potential that we have going forward as a province. We have, an incredible urban environment, an incredible rural environment as well. But the majority of our populations live in 2 cities that we want those cities to be, fabulous, dynamic, exciting, growing communities that people are proud of and that have a wonderful urban environment and high-quality services and so on. And so this charter really is about the discussion that needs to go on between those 2 cities and the provincial government about the alignment of responsibilities to make sure that these cities continue to get better. We know that we're facing incredible population pressures, growth pressures, and demographic pressures as well, which you can see in both communities. These cities are more complicated than they used to be. And we face more sophisticated challenges of governance and delivering services. And so, at this point, clearly what's in the best interest of Albertans is to sit down, have a discussion between the two cities and the provincial government about the alignment of services to make sure that we're being innovative, we're being creative, and we're doing the best job for all of the people in this province. And I would add that I think there will be lessons learned. These are described as civic charters because I think they will, as Mayor Iveson mentioned, they will inform our approach to other cities as well in this province. And so I think there's going to be an incredible process of learning and collaboration here that we can apply lessons elsewhere in Alberta.
They get a 5-minute grace period.
Okay. Operator, please put through the next call.
The first question comes from Darcy Hunting from Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Thank you. I'm calling from the legislature where the Auditor General just released a report that had quite scathing criticism of the environmental monitoring process of the oil sands. I wondered if Premier Prentice could comment on those criticisms and how he's going to be able to talk about Alberta's sustainable development of the oil sands given those criticisms.
Well, certainly pleased to respond. Firstly, I think the Auditor General did a very good job. I think the report is an excellent one. And I think there's some very valuable insight there in terms of how we move forward. I would emphasize that the joint environmental monitoring, this is an approach that was actually developed under my watch as Canada's Minister of the Environment, so I feel quite strongly about how we implement this, how we execute on it. I think the Auditor General points out that the full approach to joint monitoring only began in April of this year. So in a sense, the Auditor General has looked at the system before we implemented the joint approach in a robust way. And so I think the insights that have been offered are very valuable, and they will help Lauren Taylor and Dr. Greg Taylor as we move forward, because I think they provide a direction in terms of a complete, fulsome implementation of what was always the intention of this joint monitoring regime. And so I have every confidence that with the leadership that we currently have, they will execute on the advice and recommendations that have been provided by the Auditor General.
Do you foresee the need for any changes to the process to improve it?
Well, certainly there's a number of recommendations, in the report relative to the assembly of data, the quality of the data, the process of working together with stakeholders, the necessary process of working together with all of the First Nations, 6 of whom are in disagreement with the approach that's being followed. And so absolutely, there's valuable lessons that are contained there, and we'll act on those. We accept the report. And I must say, as the person who was one of the original architects of this joint approach to environmental monitoring, that I think the Auditor General has captured the essence of what we're trying to do. And so I look forward to making sure that happens.
Thank you.
We'll take one more question from the phone. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Next question comes from Don Braid from the Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Mr. Braid.
Okay, we'll come back to Don. We'll take one from the floor.
All right. Mr. Premier, you've indicated that Navigator Communications is on the no contract list as long as you're in office. But what answer do you have for the thousands of Calgarians that only received a fraction of their flood relief compensation, say $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, but they're owed another $300,000? How much longer do they have to wait for their money?
Well, as you know, about 10 days ago, we brought forward a series of steps to deal not only with flood mitigation and specific measures that need to be undertaken, but also to increase the resourcing of the DRP claims. And to staff up, essentially to triple the resources, Gary, that are being applied to that administrative process so that people are paid and so that we get these claims resolved. And the intent was to have all of the claims resolved, certainly through the first level of adjudication by December 1st of this year. That's an aspirational target. We want to achieve it. We know there'll be some appeals that carry on, but essentially, we cracked the whip and direction was given that to the officials that they should triple the resources of adjudication to get on with this.
I mean, it's been 16 months, and they've received maybe 10% of their funding. So how can you expect that 90 or 80% of the funding will be somehow fast-tracked in the final 7 weeks?
I mean, I intend to make sure it's fast-tracked as quickly as possible. As you are aware, I've been the Premier for the last 23 days, and we've made considerable progress. I can't explain what happened before that time, but I can assure you it's now moving forward, as are the flood mitigation projects.
Thanks.
Next question.
Hello, I have two questions. Just to be clear, what is happening with the work that's been done for 2 years? From your point of view, are you starting anew? And the second question is about, we always talk about big city charter, and now I notice it says charters. Are you looking at a charter different for each city?
On ne sait pas s'il y aura une autre charte pour les deux villes. We don't know yet. I would suggest that probably we want to look at a City of Calgary Act and a City of Edmonton Act as we move forward, but that will all play out. On a fait beaucoup de travail, et c'est une continuation de ce travail. So it's important for us to continue the work that we have already started. But to be fair, I think all of us would agree up here that we weren't moving nearly quickly enough. And so it's not a restart. It's not a reboot, to use Mayor Iveson's science fiction terms. But it is a continuation and a reigniting of the spirit behind the work we're doing. So I expect we'll do a lot of work very, very quickly.
For Premier Prentice, can you give us your thoughts on EU's decision to drop the label dirty oil on Alberta oil?
Well, I think it's a very positive development, and I would say thank you to everyone that was involved. Both representatives of the Alberta government and the national government worked diligently on this. I know there was direct contact between the Alberta government and 24 of the 28 EU countries. And so I think this is a positive step forward. It's a positive step for Alberta. It's also a positive step forward for Canada. And I think it builds on the trade partnership that we have with Europe and allows us to move forward. I would also say, and I would emphasize that it's our intent as a province to be an environmentally responsible producer of energy. And as you may have heard me say in the past, if you are in the energy business in this area, you're also in the environment business, and we need to excel at both. I've indicated that the government's policies relative to energy, the environment, and climate change are under review. And we intend to move forward in a constructive way with the federal government and others in terms of making sure that we have policies in place that allow us internationally to be proud of exactly what we're doing as Albertans.
Just a follow-up. Will there be new initiatives that will convince other jurisdictions that indeed Alberta's oil is not a dirty oil?
Well, let's be clear. The energy that is produced in this province is produced in a jurisdiction that has, firstly, the highest quality environmental regime, I think, of any oil-producing jurisdiction in the world that I'm aware of. If you speak with industry leaders who carry out business worldwide, they will tell you that the regulations that they face in Alberta are as tough as anywhere in the world. And specifically in terms of our carbon emission policies, the framework that we have, the carbon levy that we have, the requirement for large industrial emitters, these are some of the most advanced steps that have been taken anywhere in the world. We've not done a good job, as I've said before, of telling the world what we do, and to be sure there's also room for improvement. And that's why I've indicated that by Christmas I intend to have a framework put forward by the holiday season that sets out on a strategic basis a new visionary approach that we will follow on a 25-year basis to carbon emissions in our province.
We're going to take one more from the floor and one from the phone.
Premier Prentice, Saskatchewan is now towing and impounding cars for distracted drivers on their second offense. Back in June, you said you were in favor of demerit points for distracted driving in the province. New report out today showing that even using hands-free shows a very elevated risk of accidents. What are your plans now to do something more about it?
Well, I remain of that view personally, and I'll certainly have discussions with Cabinet and caucus about it. But my position has not changed relative to public safety and distracted driving.
When might we expect something?
Stay tuned.
We'll take one more from the phone. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Next question comes from Trevor Howell from Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
My question is for the Premier. Premier, figures from Alberta Infrastructure show the province has spent $79 million to purchase 72 homes in floodway zones across the province as part of the flood buyout program. Now, some have called this program knee-jerk because it was based on outdated flood maps, and that it's negatively affecting communities that are kind of like a patchwork now. And they also question the fairness of the buyout program because many flood-affected homeowners, as you know, who don't qualify for the buyout continue to struggle with the DRP claims. So my question is, in light of all the problems associated with both those programs, what is your plan in terms of implementing regulations around disaster funding in Alberta, or perhaps in creating a provincial flood insurance program?
Well, that's a lengthy question. Let's just deal with the specifics of the buyout firstly. I think the aftermath of these floods has been difficult in a number of communities, no more so than High River and Calgary, and I think the $79 million in properties you're referring to are essentially in the two cities. These were put forward on a voluntary basis. They were not compulsory, and so the owners of those properties that were located within the flood zone were afforded the opportunity to either sell their property or remain in those properties and carry on in private ownership and accept some risk of future flooding. I think that was the responsible thing to do, to afford people that opportunity to make the choice themselves. Clearly there are some implications for the communities that are affected because there will be some properties that are vacant, which we're in the process of organizing the demolition of now. We'll have to have discussions with the communities about that, but at the end of the day, I think people have been able to make their own choices, and that's been the responsible government policy. We'll work through the issues with the affected communities. I know there's also been controversy about the accuracy of the floodplain, floodway, flood zone mapping, and certainly we will endeavor to have the most up-to-date scientific information. But I think the responsible thing has been to proceed on the basis of the information we have so that people can make decisions and move forward with their lives. In terms of provincial flood insurance, I think that we'll deal with another day.
Thank you all for coming today. If there's any further questions, feel free to contact the media contact on the news release.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.